Hello and welcome to today's episode where we'll be discussing the most haunting deathbed confessions. And starting us off today is Waylon Smith. A family friend that I knew when I was a child confessed as he was dying that he'd used an assumed identity of a dead friend for his entire adult life. He was a Jewish child in Germany, and there was a program in the UK to accept 10,000 Jewish refugee children from Europe. He was slightly over the age to qualify, but a younger friend of his was murdered by the Nazis and he took the opportunity to steal the identity of this other boy. He escaped to the UK and eventually moved to North America, started a family and lived out his life. He never told anyone, including his own wife, who passed away long before he did. He was too afraid he would be deported back to Germany, even many decades later. As he was dying, he finally told his children. That's very sad, but I'm sure his friend would be happy for him to use the name as it probably saved his life. The next post is by Lies About Expertise. I worked at a hospital in, Garmisch-Partenkirchen, a small town near Munich for the last 14 years. My job there is not fancy at all. I move people around, throw out the trash, and occasionally I take care of some handy-like work, like fixing a leaking shower head and stuff like that. As you can imagine, I see a lot of patients come and go, and unfortunately some of them pass away. Such is life, I guess. I do, however, remember a few instances of people confessing to me their biggest regrets. Here are some examples. An old Polish woman told me she regretted not f***ing Hitler when she had the chance. Her words. I wanted to ask for more context, but I was afraid, to be honest. Another notable example was an old truck driver that used to work for an East Germany company. He told me that he once run over some kids with his truck and was too afraid to stop and check if they were okay. Once, another Polish lady told me that she used to be a prostitute during the Second World War and that she slept with very high up people in the government. She told me that she didn't regret that part of her life, but she couldn't tell anyone, and that was a heavy emotional drag. She also told me that she aborted more than 5 babies during that time. My god. Well, at least she doesn't have any regrets. That second one with the truck driver is brutal though. That's plagued him for his entire life, whereas if he'd gotten out and checked, they might not have died, or he could have saved them. The next post is by Fearless Leader. My great-grandmother lived a very long and interesting life. She was in her 20s in the Great Depression. She had a wild streak from those days that we don't know much about, to the point we actually don't know our great-grandfather's name, just the husband she took later. Over the course of her nearly 100-year life, she'd collected owls. We all wondered the importance of the owls. She never talked about them, we just all knew she loved owls. Well, when she was nearing death, at the age of 98 or 99, and the doctors said she had days left, my grandparents went and talked to her and they asked her if she had anything she wanted to share or ask before she goes. She thought for a moment and said, "I never understood the owls." It turns out she didn't really give a shit about owls. Near as we could piece together, sometime in the 40s or 50s perhaps, she bought either a trivet or a set of salt and pepper shakers that were owls. Then someone got her the other. Those were the oldest owls anyone could remember. But from there, someone got her an owl to match, probably a pot holder or a placemat, and then all of a sudden her kitchen was owl themed. From there it snowballed. The owls flowed like wine, baffling her for 60 years, eventually taking over as the bulk of her personal belongings. The moral is, if you're not actually into something, mention it early. I was honestly expecting something alien related, like from the Fourth Kind movie, but collecting the owls for no reason at all is pretty funny too. The next post is by Epic Boy Chold. My great aunt passed away a couple of years ago. She was suffering from viral encephalitis and fluctuated in and out of consciousness. It was truly painful to watch. Although a lot of family tended to be around her in those last few days, I once happened to be alone with her when she made some fairly odd remarks, which I've kept to myself since. On the day in question, I was playing games on my phone in her hospital room when she started to audibly mutter to herself. It became slowly more urgent and intense. Eventually, she explicitly called me to her side. Her eyes looked huge and confused. I doubt she even knew who I was. She spat out her words, most of which were barely comprehensible, putting particular emphasis on boy and ingredient. I sat there for 15 minutes listening to her erratic account of, as I finally gathered, how she sometimes used to cook eggs in the urine of a stable boy. She insisted that he was handsomely compensated for his services, but now and then she started to cry and couldn't stop. I googled this weeks later, and there indeed exists a traditional dish in China described in the West as virgin boy egg. Apparently this concept had fascinated her and she frequently recreated this herself, and served this to her family, which included my younger self, without explaining what it was. I'm not sure if she felt shame or enthusiasm about this. She often stammered something about the secret ingredient, but it quite obviously haunted her towards the very end of her life. God, I understand being fascinated with the idea or whatever, but try it yourself. I don't understand what makes you think spiking your blissfully ignorant family with virgin piss is okay. Someone in the comments asks if they were boiled or poached, and while this doesn't get a response, it is a very important question. Something about the idea of eating piss-soaked poached eggs really makes me want to be sick. Okay, on that note, there were a few shorter posts which caught my attention, so I'm going to include them here all together. My uncle's last words were to my aunt. He said, "Don't let the f***ing mortician take my gold teeth." Right before my grandma died, her heart rate shot up to the 220s. As the monitor started sounding all sorts of alarms, she yelled out, "Am I supposed to stop breathing now?" My grandma told my mum that her uncle was actually her older brother. Her dad had raped her, and it was a dark family secret. Former nursing assistant in a dementia unit of an assisted living facility. My dad is on his way to pick me up now. I work in a nursing home, and the one that sticks out for me was, "My kids left me here to die. May that not happen to you, son." And the last one, my great-grandmother confessed to me that she'd walked in on her uncle raping her sister. When he died, she told me, "I pissed on that pig's grave and laughed while I did it." Wow, a real mixed bag there. The next post is by My Fair Ladies. I didn't witness this personally, as it was between my grandfather and his father. My great-grandfather was not a nice man. He beat his children. One time he beat his daughter with a table leg, and I'm to assume he did the same to his wife. Anyway, she left him and the kids behind. This was the 30s, and I'm assuming he didn't allow her to take the kids with her. It's not like women's rights were great back then. My grandfather left home when he was 8 years old and fended for himself his entire life. On his deathbed, Nasty Grandpa told the boys that he had a bunch of money stashed on the old property, and if they went to see him, he would tell them where it was. No one went to see him. No amount of money can match the feeling of showing someone that awful just how far away they've pushed everyone in their life for the last time. The next post is by Kazlin. My mum was from China, though we are now happily residing in a European country. We went back to China for my grandmother's last few weeks as she was dying from terminal cancer. On my grandma's last days, she requested that my mum stay alone with her, and it was only then that she revealed my mum wasn't her biological kid. My grandma confessed that she bought my mum from a child trafficking ring, which was common in China, because she'd tried for many years and still couldn't get pregnant. God, that's dark. My mother cried a lot, not only for the unimaginable pain that her parents likely went through in losing a baby, but also for the fact that my grandparents have gone above and beyond to treat my mum like their little princess. They literally did treat my mum as their own. They were never abusive and only gave her the very best in life. They even willingly sent my mum to the US for university education, even though they aren't rich by any means. It feels terrible to try and glean any kind of optimism out of child trafficking because it's just so deplorable. But I am just very happy that your mum lived a good life. How do you react to that kind of news though? It's world shattering. The next post is by Inspired. I was an EMT on the 911 unit that got a call about a hit and run. Cops were on the scene first. The area of the city I worked in was rough. Some guy and his girlfriend got into a fight in the parking lot. It ended with the guy running over his girlfriend, then backing up over her. Needless to say, she wasn't doing well, and her vitals were tanking. We loaded her up, and a fireman and police officer joined with us in the back of the rig. She kept mumbling, "Tell my mum, please tell my mum." And naturally, I figured it was her asking us to tell her mum that she was hurt. The hospital takes care of that, and I put it out of my mind rather quick as we were working over her. She flatlined before we arrived. They did not get her back. My partner was finishing up her paperwork, and we turned to give her wallet back to the staff. The nurse on duty, who I know pretty well, was reading a dirty piece of paper. She looked disgusted. When I asked what was up, she simply put the piece of paperwork down. It was a letter that was picked up near her purse on the scene. She had gotten accepted into college. I realised then that in the ambulance, she was asking us to tell her mum that she got into college. That is a deep sadness I've never forgotten. The next post is by My Ovaries Hurt. I started my nursing career on a palliative unit. In my first 3 months as a RN, I pronounced 7 deaths. This one patient had advanced dementia and often believed he was at work while he was awake in the hospital. He would often give us, the nurses and care aides, tasks and jobs to do, as he believed himself to be our superior. One day near the end of December, he asks me, "When is New Year's? What day is it this year?" I tell him New Year's will be the upcoming Tuesday. He nods and tells me that he thinks he's going to have to quit after the new year. This job is getting too difficult for him and he can't keep up. It's time to retire. I tell him we appreciate all the hard work he's done and we'll miss him terribly when he's gone. That he was a great employee and we all loved working with him. That Tuesday, January 1st, he passed away peacefully in his sleep at 2 AM. I will never forget that conversation. Man, that hits hard. Okay, one more post and then I'm going to cry myself to sleep. Just a warning, this last one is a long one, but it is good. Bai needs to confess. My grandpa's whole career was in the military. He joined just after World War II since he had just turned 18 as World War II ended. Him and his 6 brothers all joined at the same time. Their first time seeing combat was in Korea. My grandpa was a paratrooper and one of his brothers was a field medic. The 6 didn't get put into any of the same squads for some reason. He said that during a really intense firefight, his squad crossed paths with one of his brother's squad. His brother was trying to help an injured squad member when he was shot 3 times. Twice in the back and once in the chest. My grandpa ran to drag him out of the way and pulled him behind cover. He held his brother in his arms behind cover and comforted him as he died. They both knew his brother wasn't making it out of this serious injury. His brother died a few minutes after being shot, and this made something in my grandpa's head just snap. He said for the rest of the war, he used the Koreans as his way of dealing with the anger of his dying brother. He went from being a terrified, inexperienced combat troop to a killing machine. He said during the rest of the war, he felt no fear, only hatred. He would fight with incredible zeal and ferocity. He didn't specify how many people he actually killed. All he said was, "The day my brother died was the day I became a killer." He didn't say how many he killed because, quote, "If I told you, you would see me as a much different man. I wasn't a man at that point, I was a cold-hearted murderer out to watch them suffer." He claimed that when the opportunity came, he would actively try to inflict as much agony on enemy troops as possible. When they were injured and on the ground, he would beat them, kick them, cut off their fingers, knock out their teeth, stomp on their legs to break them. He only did this when there were no other allies around. He literally started acting like a serial killer, torturing his victims, and didn't want any of his fellow troops to see him do this. It was dishonourable and inhumane, but he didn't care. He was just filled with rage. My grandpa received a Purple Heart and multiple prestigious military honours once the war was over. He said that if anyone found out about the horrors and inhumane actions he committed during the war, the awards would probably have been taken away. He said his time in Korea was the only time he felt like something other than human. He said it made him feel like a truly evil force and he liked it. This shocked us, since he was the kindest, most gentle man I'd ever known. He never swore, never even got angry, and was incredibly tame and loving. His marriage was fantastic, and he made sure to show my dad and my aunt nothing but love when they were growing up. You would never take him for the type of guy to excitedly kill people in battle. My grandpa died with a lot of secrets that we will never know. He only confessed to this horribly dirty fighting tactics in war because he wanted to die with some of his conscience clear. He'd never even told my grandma about what he did during the war until this point. I believe he had some underlying problems that led him acting like he did in the war. He said it was a bloodlust that he'd never felt before, and the sight of enemy Koreans suffering in pain got him excited and bursting with happiness. My grandpa wasn't a bad man. I believe the stress of the war and his brother dying in his arms was enough for him to go against everything he previously stood for. He went into the war with the intent to serve his country, but ended up fighting for his own bloodlust and rage. I can't ask him to tell me any more since he's been long dead, but I believe he did much worse than just torture injured enemies. Thank you very much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this. If there's anything that caught your attention, please leave a comment. If you want to see more of my posts, make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.